Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Steven Kotler, who's here to share with us his new book, We Are as Gods, a survival guide for the age of abundance. So what if the future isn't happening to you, but through you, and it's full of more possibility than you could even imagine? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Steven Kotler is an American journalist, award-winning New York Times bestselling author, and entrepreneur, recognized globally for his work in human performance, neuroscience, and the science of flow states. He holds a degree in English and creative writing from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Beyond writing, Kotler is a founder and executive director of Flow Research Collective, a leading organization researching peak performance, creativity, and human potential. His journalistic works have appeared in major publications like Wired, the New York Times Magazine, Time, and many others. So welcome to the show, Steven Kotler.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
That's an interesting question. My partner, Peter Diamandis, who I co-wrote the book with, we wrote in 2012, we wrote an earlier book called Abundance, which looked at how exponentially accelerating technology could soon give humanity the ability to solve grand global challenges, poverty, energy scarcity, water shortages. So Peter had been tracking those, what we called abundance metrics, and they kept going up and up, and the news was really good. And the world, the news that we were looking at was really good, yet people were absolutely convinced the world was getting worse. So that was his half. My half was I was looking at the question of how do we cooperate at scale? It seemed like a lot of the big challenges that technology was bringing. How do we control rogue AI? What do we do with manufactured pandemics? Those kinds of questions were best solved if humans figured out how to cooperate at scale. And I was looking at technologies that enabled that and looking at those problems, and where they came together is where this book came from.
Well, it sounds like the both of you are such a team here working together to bring this information forward. And in your book, you share about how we're living in an age of miracles. Can you share what that means?
Yeah, the title "We Are as Gods" is taken from a famous quote by Stuart Brand, who's the founder of the Whole Earth and many other things. And he said back in 1968, "We are as gods, and we might as well get good at it." And he was talking about technology, and he was talking about the quote unquote godlike power technology might someday give us. And it didn't in 1968. But today, just to put this in context, we started the book. I looked at the Old Testament in the Bible, and there are 83 miracles in the Bible, and they get divided into like 10 categories if you want to break them down. There are healing miracles and miracles of food and provision and so forth. And we used the same categories and we analyzed modern technology, and the end result was about 12 pages of like technologies that we now possess. We don't talk about them that way. We don't say we have omniscience. We say we have Google and ChatGPT. We don't say we have omnipresence. We have Zoom and YouTube, but the power is the same. And you can sort of keep going. Creation ex nihilo, which is creation of something from nothing. We can do that with synthetic biology. We can do that with transgenic animals, healing miracles, CRISPR, RNA, and so forth. And it really is a time where we have godlike technology at our disposal. The problem, of course, is we're trying to run godlike technology with operating systems, brains that have been built about 2 million years ago, and we haven't quite had the upgrade.
You touch on such an important piece. And so, with modern technology and this kind of comparison to biblical miracles, can you give us I know you've gone through a few, but like some examples that people would look at today that would seem like a miracle maybe a generation ago?
Well, I mean, there's a couple. The one that really stuck out at me because I was in the room when it was turned on was artificial vision, the first bionic eye. This is a really big biblical miracle. Jesus restores sight to the blind. And this is such a big miracle in the Bible that it's actually used, right? In a court of law, Jesus is pulled before the Pharisees and they use his ability to cure the blind as proof of his divine power. And I was actually in the room when the very first bionic eye was turned on and the blind can now see. That was sort of a one-off technology 20 years ago. That technology is now coming to scale and being used to treat macular degeneration, which almost 200 million people, a miracle of biblical proportion.
That must have been very profound to be there during the time of that happening.
It was wild. It was also it was very early days, and this was sort of maverick cutting edge science. And it was really, we had no idea it was going to work. The first patient actually had a seizure when it was turned on, and he recovered. And then 2 days later, was driving a car around a parking lot. He has been blind in both eyes for 25 years. I watched him drive a car in a parking lot and not hit anything. Amazing.
That is just remarkable. My goodness. Why do you think we become so numb to these breakthroughs?
I think that's part of how the brain works more than anything else. The brain always wants to notice uncertainty. It always wants to reduce uncertainty. So it's always looking for what's new. But we have something, and we all experience it. The fancy name is repetition suppression. But, like, for example, you walk by the Washington Monument on your way to work. And the first time you do it, you're like, that's the Washington Monument. And the second time, you're like, okay, that's the Washington Monument. And like the fifth time, you're like, what's that big white thing I got to walk around to get to the bathroom? Your brain just stops treating it as new, as important. So we get numb to it. That it's a natural tendency to help us to deal with the information load in the world.
So, I mean, it's interesting when we become so numb to these experiences. Are there experiences that are happening, like these big extraordinary moments that are happening in history right now that we should be more aware of?
Well, I think everything that's going on is probably important. We are definitely going through a major shift in society and technology, whether it's AI, whether it's robotics. It's everything is very much changing. If you want to put it in a simple frame, we're moving from a world of scarcity, which is what shaped evolution and shaped the brain for thousands and thousands of years. And the brain processes information in a very specific way because of it, to a world of abundance. So we're moving into a world where, you know, first of all, the prediction we made back in 2012 about sort of meeting the needs of every man, woman, and child on the planet, let's put that a little context around that statement, just so you understand what we're seeing. This will help. So when I say a world of abundance, over the past 10 years alone, 200 million people have escaped extreme poverty, which is the greatest drop in extreme poverty in history. A billion people gained access to clean drinking water. 2 billion gained access to safe drinking water. 1 billion gained access to electricity. And in 2012, there were a billion people online. So a billion people had communication technology and compute. Now it's 7 billion. That's a world of abundance. It's also going to keep going. We're about to enter a world of abundant robotics, right? 1.5 million robots are estimated to arrive by 2030. So this is a shift in literally the kind of sort of foundational fabric of the world and how the brain processes information.
Well, and to dovetail with that, in your book, you mentioned how the real bottleneck isn't the technology, but our ability to really think clearly and act very wisely at this new speed. So, what do you mean by that?
So let me do it quickly and then I'll expand on it for you. The quick version is we have local and linear brains in a global and exponential world. And what that means is when the brain evolved, the world that we lived in Everything was local. Everything we dealt with was about a day's walk away, and everything was linear. The rate of change was really slow. So your great great grandmother's life was very similar to her great great granddaughter's. Today, we live in a world that is global and exponential. Global, something happens on the other side of the world. We hear about it a second later. Our computers get it milliseconds. Exponential, meaning the rate of change is incredibly fast. So forget about the difference between your great great grandmother's life and her grandchildren, or the difference in the generations. These days, radical change can show up every week, every day, and the brain did not evolve to process information at this speed or this scale. So that's the big short version. This leads us to a very specific problem. We're trying to navigate sort of the modern world with prehistoric maps. And I think this mismatch is one of the central tensions of the 21st century that we're all feeling. The world's accelerating, the brain is not. And I said before, our ancestors evolved in a world of limits, limited calories, limited information, limited options. So scarcity shapes biology for a million years, and it teaches the brain five basic habits: over detect threat, under detect opportunity, prefer the familiar over the new, conserve energy at all costs, and collapse complexity into simple narratives. And you see this a lot right now with all the apocalyptic thinking that's sort of everywhere. That's people looking at a complex situation and being able to say, oh, this is just going to end terribly, because that's all they can think of. So this is everywhere right now, and I think this is all of us.
It sounds like a lot of people are stuck in that fight and flight kind of situation as opposed to maybe looking at things a little bit more rationally.
I think for sure that's exactly what we're seeing. And I think it gets sort of a little stronger. But the difficulty with fight or flight, of course, is one of the first things that shuts down in the brain is creativity. When we get scared, the brain wants logical, linear, safe, and secure, right? Give me something that worked a million times. Don't give me something new. And when a world's moving this fast, most of our problems need creative innovation to solve. The same old solutions aren't going to get us there.
In your book, you talk about a bias cascade. Can you share with us what that is?
Yeah, the place to start is with information overload. So I think we got to start there. And I need to put it in perspective because it's wild. So in 3000 BCE, which is the very first year basically that there's written language, Buckminster Fuller years ago calculated that about 4,000 books or 1 gigabyte worth of data was produced that year. Now, this is not the environment the brain evolved in, but let's just say it's the maximum limit of what the brain evolved to handle in a year. Last year, we produced 181 zettabytes of information, and that is essentially 181 quadrillion books worth of information. The bigger problem is the bandwidth of attention. What we can pay attention to is about 120 bits. So we've produced 181 quadrillion books, and we can hold 121 bits. And working memory, which is all the things you can think about at any one time, is about 4 concepts. So we are massively overloaded with information at all times. And we feel this, right? It's coming in on our screens. It's everywhere all the time. Information overload tends to lead to this cascade that you mentioned. And it first thing that happens is information overload goes to cognitive overload. Cognitive overload is literally, I can't think about any more stuff. I'm tapped out. That starts to fracture attention. We all know this feeling. It's harder and harder to pay attention these days. Once it gets hard to pay attention, that leads to difficulty making decisions, what we call decision fatigue. Once you're there, once you can sort of no longer make those decisions, it produces meaning drift. So things that used to mean a lot stop meaning as much, and maybe you no longer exactly know who you are and how you fit in this world. That starts to erode creativity, motivation, and resilience. And all this leads to burnout, which I think is sort of everywhere. And what we're seeing now for the sort of the first time is these extended periods of burnout produced by information overload lead into this kind of what is technically known as adaptive rigidity. It means I'm out of options. Performance theater, which means I'm just living my life. I'm going through the motions. I'm no longer living my life. I'm just faking it. And eventually that becomes identity collapse, and you really no longer know who you are in the world. And again, I think I'm seeing evidence of this everywhere. I nicknamed this exponential leadership syndrome in the beginning because I was noticing it in people I was working with who were CEOs and founders and that sort of people. And then within a couple of months, I started to realize it's really everybody. And I think we're all feeling this.
Well, at least we're not alone, right? It seems like so many people are being affected by that. And one of the things that you talk about in your book is learned helplessness. What is that, and how is that affecting us?
Oh, that's interesting. So, this learned helplessness was research done by Martin Seligman, who is famous as the University of Pennsylvania psychologist, who's one of the co-founders of the entire positive psychology movement. And in a sense, learned helplessness is the exact opposite of positive psychology. So it's basically if you're in a situation where you feel helpless, where you feel a victim, when you adopt a victim mindset. And the reason this is so important today is many people are talking about AI this way, right? They're talking about AI as a thing that's happening to us. AI is coming. It's going to wreck the world. It's going to take our jobs. It's happening to us. We feel helpless. And this learned helplessness basically shuts down our ability to even get in the fight and fight back. Once we sort of adopt that victim mindset, the brain stops learning from mistakes. It actually stops producing the energy needed to solve problems. Earlier, I said that the brain wants to conserve energy at all costs. This is one example of that. When the brain thinks you're a victim, you have no control over what's happening in your life, it stops wasting energy trying to help you solve the problem. If you can't solve the problem, why try? So this is why victim mindsets anywhere are especially dangerous, but we're seeing it now with technology where people are treating themselves as they're victims of AI rather than, hey, humans are actually creating AI and we have choice, we have options. There's a lot we can do here. So that's where learned helplessness sort of comes in and why we need to fight back against it.
Well, it seems that AI can really be so helpful in so many ways. So to take a very positive approach with that, I think would be a better way to go.
I think so too, and I think a lot of people's fears, really, and understandably, are centered, at least right now, around their jobs. And I think here the information, it's interesting and conflicting. So AI is moving incredibly, incredibly fast, faster than any technology we've ever seen in history, and it's going to speed up because it's going to gain the ability to learn from itself in new ways. The fear, of course, is AI is going to take our jobs. And it's true. AI is going to take parts of our jobs, but it will not take entire jobs all at once. What it does is it automates tasks. Jobs are bundles of tasks. They're embedded inside of teams and workflows, incentives and regulations and culture. So AI moving at software speed, it rewrites a task overnight. Jobs don't work that way. They move at human speed, right? Companies have to reorganize, people have to retrain, laws have to catch up. In fact, you're even starting to see this in the software industry, which laid off a ton of people about a year ago because AI was coming. And in the past 3 months, they've started to hire people back. So some of that is going on. I think AI is also going to create entire new classes of jobs. And we're already seeing this, right? There are writers who do what I do in a sense, and they're being hired to fix AI slop and make copy seem more quote unquote human. So it's a massive transformation, but I think it's more of a transition and not a light switch.
Well, I like how your book is really a psychological guide, survival guide for this new era. So, what's one mindset shift that people can make to feel more empowered instead of that overwhelm?
Well, the basic one you got to start with, I think, is curiosity. Curiosity is an amazing weapon for human performance. And the reason is one of the main reasons of the fear is that there's just so much uncertainty and this tends to kind of narrow our options, right? If you approach the novel with curiosity, you automatically expand your options. So that's the place you got to start. And you really, in an age where AI is starting to provide more and more facts, you have to cultivate curiosity. It's really what allows you to collaborate with AI and maximize your power as well. So that's a simple place to start.
So much can be gained from using our curiosity. And one of the things you talk about in your book also is the importance of awe. How can we reconnect with a sense of wonder and actually improve our mental health and perspective?
That's an interesting question. Awe is a very, very, very interesting experience. It provides a total cognitive reset. Basically, it resets the nervous system, and it's what happens when the brain has to accommodate sort of a bigger set of facts. So this is what happens with when we encounter geological time. We go to the Grand Canyon, and we're overwhelmed by the fact that this thing took millions and millions of years to evolve, and the brain can't really process millions and millions of years. It sort of short circuits the conscious mind, and the conscious mind has to pass the information over to the subconscious to sort of rearrange perspective. So awe is really actually interestingly easy to cultivate. And despite the fact that like you can stare up at the night sky, you can encounter nature, but you can also teach yourself to kind of notice the amazing and the familiar. There's so many poems written about universes tucked inside of dewdrops for the simple reason that there actually are universes tucked inside the dewdrops. That's a accurate picture of reality, and we forget things like that. So if we remind ourselves to look at the natural world through fresh eyes, it tends to produce low-grade awe experiences, and these tend to provide a cognitive reset that we really need in this age.
Oh boy, do we. That's without a doubt. And for our listeners that are feeling a little anxious about the pace of change, I mean, what's one practical way they can become an active participant in shaping the future rather than feeling afraid or a victim of it?
I think it's got to start with attention in your nervous system. And I think there's actually two things I want to speak to. One is killing off distraction. Because we're faced with so much information overload, the brain really honestly doesn't multitask. That's sort of never been true. And I think now worse than ever. The brain is built to focus on one thing at a time. Could be a conversation with your wife or your kids, could be the work project you're doing. We are not going to be more powerful than our devices. So we have to shut down notifications, turn off our phones, turn off our emails. When I first started working with executives 20 years ago, most had three incoming streams of information. You could message them, you could email them, you could call them. Today, the average executive I work with has 17 incoming streams of information. WhatsApp and Slack and all the rest. You got to shut that down so you can focus on what's in front of you, which focuses the gateway to everything the brain can do. So it's the first step towards sort of staying sane and effective in an environment of rapid change. The second thing is you have to have a way to calm your nervous system down very, very quickly. And that's really easy too. 2-minute process for you. First thing you want to do is throughout the whole 2 minutes, you want to make your exhales twice as long as your inhales. When your exhales get to be about 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds long, so your inhales are like 4 or 5 seconds long, your brain goes, oh, look, really long exhales. You must be calm. And it stops wasting all the energy it would use to produce stress hormones. That's the first minute. Just breathe. The second minute, continue breathing and then look at the world out of the corner of your eyes, peripheral vision. Focal vision is like, I'm focused on the threat ahead. That's fight or flight. When we look at the world out of the corner of our eyes, the brain does the same thing. It goes, oh, look, you're looking at the world out of the corner of your eyes. There's obviously not a threat in the room. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this. And it calms you down. So I think by killing distraction and learning to sort of calm the nervous system, you can really go a long way in today's environment.
Oh my goodness, Stephen, I thought your book, We Are as Gods, was just such a great read. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
You can find the book anywhere, in any bookstore. Amazon is selling it. You can go to weareasgodsbook.com as well. And you can find me at Steven Kotler, StevenKotler.com.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, We Are as Gods, a survival guide for the age of abundance. Again, We Are as Gods is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.